Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I'd like to start by thanking the organizing committee for allowing me to be here today. It's a great pleasure to be back in Dublin to speak about heart-lung interaction in a country where people have so warm hearts. I mean it. I'd like to take those of you that are not expert physiologists, like me, to something which looks like more heart-lung interaction for dummies, or at least try to convince you that you should stay until the end of this conference, because indeed what these experts are explaining to you today is extremely important at the bedside when you want to actually set the ventilator or manage an hemodynamically unstable ventilated patient. And I'm not going to go into deep physiological detail. I'm just trying to give you some examples that indeed when you apply some of this knowledge at the bedside, it can be extremely helpful. And you could do this lecture in asthma, COPD. I've chosen ARDS. So, two conflicts of interest to disclose. The first one is a couple years ago, I've gave advice to G for a device that you will see at the end of the lecture. And the second conflict of interest, it's not a conflict of interest. I have to disclose that in '78, Michael, indeed, I was born, but not at all interested in this stuff when you were already playing God. So what is the problem? The problem that I'm facing as a clinician is I have a patient that is on the ventilator and is hemodynamically unstable. And I'm starting to wonder whether indeed it's heart-lung interaction that's the problem. And I would say, first of all, first things come first. The first thing you do when you put a patient on mechanical ventilation very often is to start with sedation, and that's very often the first cause of shock. So before you actually go and scratch your brain, think about how you're using the drugs you're supposed to use on a daily basis. And then you will have to pick your targets. And it's really important to think about the targets because they are really numerous. If you think about the hemodynamic targets, so are you interested in what? Mean arterial pressure, CVP, cardiac output, oxygen delivery, SCVO2, lactate clearance, microcirculation, such as people like Daniel, who has done pioneering work in this field. It's really important to think about what your therapeutic objectives are going to be in these patients. And once you pick your favorite target, then pick your favorite monitoring tools. Because you cannot actually avoid clinical disasters if you don't assess, measure, and monitor. Filling pressures, when I was a medical student, we were putting swan guns in every patient, even 2 swan guns in some patients. And now we've learned that indeed it's probably not very helpful and that CVP or pulmonary arterial occlusion pressure does not actually help us to understand the fluid status of a patient or his fluid responsiveness. And Cocorico, the French group, has done a lot of work to show indeed, when Michael was in sabbatical in Paris, that if you look at dynamic changes, it's probably much more helpful to actually think about how you may give fluid to a patient on mechanical ventilation. But beware, you're not treating only the circulation, you're not treating only the lung, and Daniel, as many others, have shown that those indices, they change when you use low tidal volume. So, I mean, at the bedside, we need to understand a little bit of heart-lung interaction if you want to do something good. I said monitoring, arterial line mandatory if you want to avoid clinical disasters. Echocardiographic evaluation today, I think, became also mandatory. And then you have all the tools that may help you to monitor cardiac output, and you discuss this tomorrow. The main issue for me is you have an hypoxemic patient with sick lungs and hemodynamic instability, and you need to make good decisions for these patients. Let's say the patient has ARDS. I turn to my favorite table from the Berlin ARDS definition, and I'm trying to think, okay, so what should I do in terms of setting the ventilator to avoid clinical disasters, thinking about heart-lung interaction? Low tidal volume ventilation is a no-brainer. I mean, 15 years ago, it's been shown. And then you have the PEEP level that may be different depending upon the severity of the patient. And interestingly, if you reanalyze all the papers that basically have led to this evidence, we are coming now with new concept where people are telling you that maybe the driving pressure, the difference between the plateau pressure and the PEEP may be actually the best predictor of survival or death, and you should probably not go beyond a driving pressure of 12. Again, how do we set the ventilator? I mean, we've said that tidal volume are really awful. Yes, indeed. You increase tidal volume, you increase plateau pressure. It seems to be deleterious in terms of survival. But not always. If you also increase PEEP, keep the driving pressure quite low, it doesn't seem to be associated with an increase in mortality. And all the opposite, you know, if you have a constant plateau pressure, but if you increase PEEP, you seem to have a protection, whereas with low PEEP and high driving pressure, you have actually a decrease in survival. So again, at the bedside, tidal volume, we tend to know, but PEEP, it's really one of the most difficult things we have to set at the bedside. And what is the effect in terms of arterial oxygenation, lung recruitment, lung protection, hemodynamics, oxygen delivery? These are the questions that I'm facing at the bedside, and this is where I need to understand a little bit more about heart-lung interaction. Just to understand for hemodynamics and oxygen delivery, they have shown you that indeed the increase in pressure has complex hemodynamic effect, and that's especially true when you're looking at PEEP. A long time ago, not very long before you actually looked at heart-lung interaction, Peter Suter have shown us that indeed if you increase PEEP, you're going to increase PO2, decrease shunt, but also at the same time decrease cardiac output and sometimes oxygen delivery. And in some patients, it's quite dramatic. So PEEP has complex hemodynamic effects, and you've seen that these hemodynamic effects may be different in patients that are preload dependent, in patients that have afterload dependent. They are completely different, and this actually depends on the etiology, the volume status of the patient, and the underlying condition. And this should never be forgotten when we are treating these patients. If you look at large studies, this comes, for instance, for reanalysis of the FACT trials and try to understand whether increasing PEEP actually changes cardiac index. It doesn't seem to be clear. I mean, the relationship between both is not clear, but this is not what we are treating. We are treating individual patients, and we want to understand what's going on in the individual patients. You've seen this slide already that shows you that if you increase PEEP, you're going to have a decrease in venous return, but most of the time it's compensated by an increase in mean systemic pressure, and this increased mean systemic pressure actually is associated with virtually no change in cardiac index. But in other patients, like here, you have flow limitation. You cannot have the same increase in mean systemic pressure, and then you will have a decrease in cardiac index. You've seen already that indeed the two ventricles are interdependent, that they share the common fibers, the septum and the pericardium, and acute distension of one chamber is going to have opposite effect on the other chamber. And at the bedside, you can actually show this to your fellow. You can show this when you're looking at echo. You've seen already this slide, and the group of Antoine Vieillard-Baron has done pioneering work in helping us to understand that high tidal volume or high PEEP level sometimes will induce right ventricular dysfunction or right ventricular failure sometimes. I like this paper because they looked at the effect of acute hypercapnia now that we live in a 6 milliliter per kilogram era. And with limited tidal volume, you can see that you still have a reduction in cardiac index. But interestingly, if you read the paper, they tell you during the study, treatment changes that can influence hemodynamic conditions, such as fluid loading and so on, were avoided, which is not what we do. This study coming from Jean-Louis Teboul's group showed that indeed, when you have an increase in PEEP and a reduction in cardiac index, if you infuse fluids or if you do passive leg raising, you can actually counteract this. And this is what we have to do at the bedside, understand where our patient is so that we can actually treat our patient and treat a patient not forgetting that the lung status greatly affect hemodynamics. What I mean is we ventilate patients most of the time because they have lung disease. Most of the time, the changes in infrathoracic pressures and volumes are going to have a profound effect on those hemodynamic variables that we need to monitor at the bedside if we want to understand what we are doing when we are turning the knob of the ventilator. And I'd like to contend that monitoring respiratory parameters may also help. We very often fail to look at changes in CO2. When minute ventilation stays constant and we actually change the PEEP level, what's happening with the CO2 actually instructs us on what's going on in terms of hemodynamics. And when we are starting to look at lung volume, then we need to learn more in terms of what are we doing for lung recruitment or protection. I love this paper. 94, Marco Ranieri looked at patients with ARDS and looked at their static and dynamic PV curves. And he was able to show that you have patients with concave PV curves where when you increase PEEP, you have recruitment. In these recruiters, it seems to be good to increase PEEP. Whereas in this patient with convex PV curve, when you increase PEEP, you have a displacement of the PV curve on the x-axis, which indicates overdistension. Very interestingly, the patient with the concave PV curve are the one where you have a better increase in oxygenation and a better decrease in shunt. But they are also the one who pay the greatest tribute in terms of hemodynamics, with a greatest reduction in cardiac index and oxygen delivery. That means that optimization of preload is absolutely mandatory in these patients. And if you actually look at what's going on, I love this it's a lovely study published recently in Critical Care Medicine in cardiac surgical patients, not ARDS, where they show that indeed in non-preload dependent and preload dependent, changes in tidal volume, changes in compliance, will have different effects in patients that are non-preload dependent or preload dependent in terms of changes in the transmural pressure of the pericardium. So we need an integrative approach to avoid clinical disasters. And to me, this integrative approach may start with this algorithm. Indeed, get the basis right. Limit plateau pressure, limit driving pressure. If you have done this and you are looking at your PCO2 is still very high, you need to increase respiratory rate, you need to remove the HME, you need to do this before you actually look at the PEEP level. And then you will adjust your PEEP level to right ventricular function and plateau pressure so that you make sure that you do not induce right ventricular dysfunction or failure. But there is something still to be done, which is to use PEEP to counteract hypoxemia. That's what we do at the bedside. We have a patient which is hypoxemic, we increase PEEP, and then we see that we have a decrease in cardiac output, and then we think, okay, may I give fluid to the patient? And you say, but I'm going to increase edema, and basically you don't know what to do. That's where I think that monitoring lung volume may actually play a role. I mean, if you look at this paper by Luciano Scatinoni's group, take 1 gram of aspirin before, it's going to show you that in different patients, you have a great heterogeneity in terms of lung stress and lung strain, and that actually depends upon your end expiratory lung volume. If for the same plateau pressure and the same tidal volume, lung stress and the strain markedly depend upon an expiratory lung volume, that I think cannot be debated. If you increase PEEP and if an expiratory lung volume significantly increase, then we would contend that the risk of ventilator-induced lung injury will decrease. And that's why I think that now that we have tools to monitor this at the bedside, we may integrate this in our algorithm. Example, you look at PEEP level, you change PEEP from 16 to 8, and you look at SpO2. Then you look at the changes in functional residual capacity. 600 ml between 12 and 16, that's important. When actually I look at the change in cardiac output and I see this, because I want this 600 ml and I believe that it's going to significantly reduce the risk of ventilator-induced lung injury, then I may actually give fluids to this patient. And this is what we can do at the bedside to better understand applied physiology and actually restore the responsiveness in terms of oxygenation. Can we predict fluid responsiveness? Jean-Louis Teboul's group has shown that actually pulse pressure variation in patients with low compliance is not really good. But you may still do tests such as the N-expiratory occlusion test that will help you, even with low PEEP or high PEEP, to predict who can actually respond to this type of maneuver with quite a reasonable sensitivity and specificity. So in summary, if you want to avoid clinical disaster in ventilated patients, first get the basic right. Set low tidal volume, even lower than 6. Ask yourself, who are you treating? With the patient, what is the disease, not the syndrome, and what are the comorbidities, because they are going to influence heart-lung interaction. Assess and monitor, monitor, monitor dynamically each time you change something. And set your priority. ARDS etiology and lung status may influence those priorities, the hemodynamic status of the patient also, the potential for recruitment, and this can be also assessed quite simply now at the bedside. And think, first of all, not of lung protection, but patient protection. And sometimes actually do this decremental PEEP trial to assess PEEP oxygen relationship, but also PEEP and expiratory lung volume relationship. Thank you very much for your attention.